am doing a little playtime today, it's because I want to use and move out of my craft room this basket of mists. This is my entire collection of mists. They go back many, many years. There's lots of Mr. Huey's. Those were always my favorites. There's some Dilutions. There's Glimmer Mist from Tattered Angels. There's this spray stuff I got that was supposed to be perfect, that never clogged. Clogged, I think, the first time I used it. I mean, there's just stuff in here that worked really well, and some of it was incredibly messy. Colors that were too vibrant, colors that I loved, and I have very little left. I mean, everything. But the reason I'm getting rid of this is I decided a long time ago when I needed space in my craft area again, I was going to have to start throwing out some things that I kind of considered valuable, that I kind of kept, because I'd gotten down to the point where I'd gotten rid of all the stuff that I really didn't use or didn't care about anymore, and I bought myself a room air conditioner that sits out in the middle of the floor, and then it vents to the window, has this tube that vents to the window. It's wonderful. Used it all summer, early fall, but I didn't want to have to walk around it. It was in the bathroom. I didn't have to walk around it all through the fall and winter. So when I started moving it where I wanted it to go and moving other things around, this basket became a casualty. It's a long history of what moved where, but this is the thing that needed, one of the things that needed to go. And so I've had it sitting out for several months now, waiting for me to do something with it. So today is play day. What I want to do with these mists is to come up with ways to use them for 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever few last projects. My rule is to have fun. If I can't do something with the bottle, I can't get it open or do whatever I want to do with it, it's gone. We're not going to fiddle with it over and over again. You're just going to move on. If there's very little mist left, there's very little mist left. We're not going to worry about it. There's a lot of mist left and I can't get the bottle open. Well, I tried. What I want to do with them is to do techniques that I do not have to spray them, because I know that probably 70% of what's in this basket won't spray anymore or spray consistently. They haven't been used in years in some cases. So it's time to just try to open the tops and maybe work with a paintbrush and do whatever I can do with them in various techniques that way. So I'm playing. And I've got some things out here to play with. The only thing I've done to start with is I'm going to try a technique that I learned from Wilna Furstenberg, I think is how you pronounce her last name. I took one of her classes many years ago over at the old 2Ps, and we used watercolors for this, but I'm going to try it with mists. And what we did was put gesso on. I'm doing it on chipboard. I can't remember if it was on chipboard at that time or not. But put gesso down, a kind of a thick globby layer, and then went over it with watercolors. And it came up these really pretty, interesting designs. I'm going to try it with mists, with brushing the mists on and seeing what would happen. You could probably spray the mists on if this works. So we're going to try that as an experiment. While I had some of the watercolor, or excuse me, of the gesso out, I put a few little strokes of it on this paper, and I also thought I would try that on some other paper and see if I could do some kind of sort of reverse image with the stencil. So I'm going to do that first, and then we're going to start playing with the mists. And as I say, some things will work and some won't, and we're just going to have a little fun. So I'm going to put some of this gesso over the stencil just on some plain white cardstock. I'm kind of globbing it on because I want some texture, and then you can see that finished and dried, or drying. And we'll set those aside. And we're going to work on a few other things here. I've got some watercolor paper and some regular white cardstock, and I'm stamping those with I just grabbed a flower stamp, just something that I can play with, because I want to see if I can paint on some color as though I were using watercolors or some other medium in that same way. So I'm just going to paint in my flower petals. And what I found interesting about this is the color shades really nicely coming directly from these bottles of mist. I have one there from Dilutions, and this is a Heidi Swap. I found that it really moved very well on this plain white paper. Now it dries fast. Everything with the mists and paper dries quickly. But it does, I thought it did a much better job than working with watercolors, because I also experiment with this on some watercolor paper. and that was the first one. That's the one I was doing. It was watercolor paper. This is the plain white paper. It does not have to be watercolor paper, which you kind of have to do on a lot of the different mediums, but this one you did not, and I really liked it better on the plain white paper than I did on the watercolor paper. And I tried some Mr. Huey mist there as from Studio Calico as well. Now another technique I want to experiment with here, we're back to the gesso, and this is the pieces of chipboard. So we're going to play a little bit with those. And I'm just spreading the mist on with a paintbrush over the gesso, and you get a lot of that texture. I'm also playing with a piece of designer paper that's a white background and it's got these black dots on it. Black and white combos are a little too high contrast for me, so adding the color to the background can give you kind of an interesting look. Now these little pieces of chipboard look pretty good, and I'm going to get a little bit heavy-handed here with my experimenting in a minute. One of the things I tried to do was to add some water and spread out the color, but it dries so quickly on paper that that just doesn't work very well. Now here was another one of my experiments. This was my first effort with dilutions mist and a paintbrush, and what I found was it goes on really, really dark. So I didn't get the best look on this chipboard for this, but the technique of putting gesso on the chipboard and the mist over the top with the paintbrush does work. So there's a couple they've dried. To say they don't look fabulous, but it's a technique that will work. Now I have a little better success here when I take the dilutions mists and I'm just putting them in some old packaging, so I can and using that as a palette, so I can water them down. And adding a little water to the dilutions mist, which have a real intense color, lets me have a better color, and when I go over those stenciled gesso designs, it really colors them beautifully. So I liked this look a lot. And of course your mist goes a long way this way too. So I'm just playing with a few colors. And getting an interesting look here. And I decided to splatter a little bit of mist on there with my paintbrush too to get that kind of splattered effect. And that really added something interesting to the dimension of this as well. Now I'm going to try another mist. This one is from Prima Marketing. And we're going to go over this same design that was done with gesso on white paper. And this time you get almost a relief kind of look, but it really sticks to that gesso, so that part is a little bit darker. Actually, I'm sorry, it's a little darker behind the gessoed area onto the white paper, so you really see the design. So it's really a pretty effect that you get with that. Now I'm back to the black and white papers. I wanted to try these again because I didn't like my first sample very much. This is Tattered Angels Mist, which is a little bit softer color. It has glimmer. It has some glittery stuff in it, and didn't take a lot to cover a piece of designer paper with this, and it looks so pretty. I just loved the Tattered Angels one, and I'm trying some Mr. Huey as well. It doesn't move quite as much over the paper, and you don't have the glimmer to it, but you get a really pretty effect with it too. Because it doesn't move as much, it's not as smooth, but that's just a different look, more of a distressed effect. It's another thing you can do with your mist is to recolor pattern paper. Now you can also use them to recolor chipboard, and that's what I'm experimenting with here. This is like a fire engine red. It's called Rudolph or something. It's a very, very bright red color. You can see it there in the palette. But when it goes on the chipboard, it gets a lot darker. And I tried watering it down too, and later on in the video you'll see the finished version of this. But it is a darker color over that chipboard. Yeah, there it is over to the right. See, it's not as bright, but you can color chipboard with your mist. You may just want to play on some scrap chipboard like I was doing to see what color it's going to be. Now I wanted to try regular emboss relief, and this is where I have embossed a design using, and here's my camera cut off and you didn't get to see me put the color over this, so I'm going to do another one. This is where I take a stamp and I stamp it with Versamark and go over it with clear embossing powder. It's a very common stamping technique. I'm not demonstrating it here, but you've seen this, and I've got videos that show it and lots of different places that show this. And I'm taking several different mists and we're going to paint on our background and see how it does with the relief. And what I found is, you can see from my one sample there, that what should happen is the background paper, the white, should really stay white underneath the design, and it does. In fact, I think it does better than any other medium that I've ever used. Usually the embossed area picks up a little bit of the color, but this just doesn't. You get a lot of the white coming through. Now what you don't get though is, because the mists dry really fast on the paper, is you can't blend the colors like you could if you were doing this with watercolors. So I get kind of hard edges between them. And that's not too bad between this yellow and the orange, but I'm going to switch gears here and do a very different color, and it doesn't mix like it does with some things where typically if you do blue and orange you get kind of a mud look. You don't get that kind of effect, but it just doesn't blend at all, and so you get that kind of rough, hard edge there. So it's probably not the best choice of two colors to go together. But you can really see how your embossed image shines through. And after that dries a little bit, I'm taking, well, even before it dries, I'm taking a paper towel and wiping off the extra mist, and you just get a really clear image that you have embossed. Now I did want to try with chipboard again and try some recoloring, because I have a lot of chipboard letters. Some of them are like that V. They're part of sets that are just raw chipboard. And then that number 6 that I pulled out of a pack of thickers, that is a set of thickers, and it had this pink color over the top. I just peeled that color off. So some of your thickers that are chipboard, you can just peel the top layer off. So what I'm doing here is taking some dilutions, and I'm trying to water it down because the color is so intense in their mists, and then just painting my letters. And when I first did them here, they look really dark, like a real deep navy blue, but they're going to dry lighter. And I'm using a popsicle stick to kind of hold it in place so I don't have to get the color on my hands. Some mists will really stain your hands, and dilutions is one of those. And I didn't have on gloves while I was working here. But it's super fast, and doing this with a paintbrush is a lot less messy than spraying it on, and more consistent. It's not easy to find blue thickers, so this is going to be a good way for me to get them if I want to hang on to this mist. And those will dry, and we'll come back and look, but they do dry a little bit lighter. Now you can always just splatter, and that's another way of using your mist, just splattering them on with a paintbrush. So I had a little bit of mist there, and I thought I'd just show you. You don't see this used as much as it used to. There for a while we were splattering every scrapbook page we made. But I find this easier to control than spraying mist on. And I'm going to do another one. And you can flick it on. You can splatter it where you tap the paintbrush, or you can flick it from the edge of the paintbrush like I'm doing here. You get a softer mist if you do the second technique. And the last thing I'm going to do is to kind of create my own pattern paper. And I'm creating this plaid design. And I'm doing this to show you that the mists, the colors will show through the layers. It dries very fast. And when I go over all these greens with a pink color, it doesn't end up as a muddy color. It just shows the color through. So there's a better transparency than you get with a lot of mediums. Paint would just completely cover it, and this has a more transparent look, and it really lets the underneath color shine. And if you want brown, then you kind of have to do brown, like I'm doing here, to add some color into creating this stripe. And I didn't really like that white background, so I went over the whole thing with some Tattered Angels mist and like just a light blue green, and that kind of colored the whole, made everything a little bit darker and took care of that background. Okay, so let's look at all the stuff that we did with the mist, and we didn't spray anything. The sprayer bottles, I never touched the top of the sprayer bottle on any of this stuff. And oh gosh, there's one I never used, gold. That would have been really fun. So we'll have to do that next time. Let's look at the things that we did create. You can stamp and you can color with the paintbrush. And I found I actually liked it better on just this cheap white coverweight cardstock that you buy like at this Staples, or I think I've even found it at Walmart. That kind of weight cardstock, or you can do it on watercolor paper, but I liked it really, it colored the best on this kind of paper of any medium that I have used. So that's one thing that you can do. We colored some paper, some designer paper, and these were papers that had a white background and some kind of black printing on them, and it could be anything, but that's the contrast that I chose because I'm not a big fan of black and white combos. It's just too much contrast to me within the paper. It gets too busy. So this way I can make it whatever color I want to make it. And this one I did with Tattered Angels mist, and I just love how that one came out. And this was, I think, some of the Studio Calico mist, and it's also really pretty. So it just depends on the look that you're wanting to get. This one didn't look as good, but there's I've got more of this black and white paper, and I'm definitely wanting to use that technique. I've tried doing some chipboard or some gesso. I did gesso on paper and kind of a relief type of look here that looks really pretty with a single mist. I think that was that Prima marketing mist. And then this one using some of the bolder colors. Again, really interesting, and there's some texture to this too because of the gesso. And there are other mediums. I didn't try my gel medium and some of the other mediums, but there were other things that you could work with. Now this was gesso on chipboard, and I got a little bit too much of some of the, I think it's the Dilutions mist, so it didn't turn out that pretty, but the technique works. The thing to remember is this stuff dries really fast. So if you want to mix colors, you've got to move really quickly with it, or you may have to mix the color on a separate palette and then put it on there because it's just going to dry really, really fast. The mist seems to dry faster than anything else, watercolors or anything that I have worked with. Now you can use it to just paint chipboard a particular color. It won't be as vibrant as the color would be if you were spraying it on white paper because this is not white. This is a light brownish natural color, and so you're not going to get it as bright. This was the watered down version. This was the full version. It does dry lighter, which is what happened when I did these letters, and I love these letters. This was a pretty dark color from Delusions called After Midnight, but it made the most beautiful deep blue letters, and finding this color blue is very, very hard in chipboard. So I have some chipboard I can peel the top up of and use, or I have just some raw chipboard, and I can make a pretty blue color the next time I need letters. Now we also did some emboss relief, which I stamped with Versamark, did white or clear embossing powder, and I can't find the original one. Oh, here it is. with these colors, and then I did a stamp, a little bit more fun stamps. But you see here where when you're trying to blend the colors, they just don't really blend because they dry really fast. So this would be something you'd kind of want to do maybe in one color or colors that really coordinate well together. I'll probably use this as a card backing and like put my greeting or my message on a separate sheet of paper right on top of that and try to cover that line up because I think it's pretty. I think the colors are really pretty. And then finally I took some of the mist and just sort of made my own designer paper. And it shows that the colors don't really blend. So you can still, even when you put pink over the top, you can still see the green underneath. You don't get mud like you do when you would typically put pink and green together because again, it dries really fast. But you do get the glimmer showing through if you have any mist that has any glimmer in it. So those were the techniques that I used, and I really enjoyed doing them. I had a lot of fun playing with the mist without doing anything with the spray bottles. Oh, I forgot splatter. Did some splatter. There's only one drawback to all of this. I now do not want to get rid of my mists. The goal here was to do some techniques, have some fun with it, do a page or cards or something, and then just get rid of them. I don't want to get rid of them. So I've had to come up with something else to get rid of out of my craft room so these don't have to sit on my work table all the time. I can redo some of my storage, the way I'm storing my embossing powders. The clear embossing powder I need handy because I use that, but I have the larger containers full of gold embossing powder and silver and all. Those don't need to be in big Gladware containers. They can go back into their little bottles because I just don't use them that much. And those are taking up a lot of storage space that I can use for my mists and maybe some other things too. So anyway, thank you for joining me through this process. I've enjoyed it so much. It's about the year end, and I'm kind of getting ready to do my year-end wrap-up page and my plans for the new year. I'm not sure anybody should be making plans anymore, but I'm going to keep trying for 2021. And I think I'm going to take these techniques and use them to create my page rather than, I usually pick out some pretty pattern paper. I haven't bought any pattern paper in 2 years at least. And I don't think I want to go through my old pattern papers. I think I'm going to make my own and do a page using some of these own techniques. I might pull something from my pattern papers, but I think I'm going to try some of these techniques and use those on my wrap-up and 2021 page. So that video will be coming along. I appreciate you joining me. If you have some tips for how to use mists that don't involve spraying them, I'd love to hear them, so just put them in the comments and maybe I can incorporate them into my next layout. Thanks again. Bye.